Stuart, I mean, I cannot fathom what that day must have been like for you. Dare I say you've been in many war zones before, but had you ever experienced what you experienced on that day?
Um, no, it was very extreme, and I have, yeah, I've been taken hostage a couple of times. Once I was taken hostage in Ukraine, actually, in I think 2014, and I've been blown up, and I've been shot at loads of times. But this was a professional ambush that had no intention of missing or stopping, and we're talking to the police and investigators since. This is an actual, not just being caught up in war, which is very dangerous. And every journalist who works in a war zone knows that there are dangers from being in the war zone. What is different about this is it was a specific attempt to kill us. And we know that in the days that followed the attack upon us, many family cars were attacked and many civilians were killed. We survived mainly because we're wearing body armor. I mean, I was shot, but I also took 6 rounds into my back as well, which,
Gosh.
funny enough, I only found much later. Richie, who remarkably filmed everything, was also shot in the back, but again, his armor saved him. And we do quite a lot of training for these things, and we're quite experienced. And the reason actually we filed that story was not about haven't we done well. It was much more, this is what's happening to Ukrainian people every single day, particularly along this road, which is the M06, which was the western motorway into the capital, which the Russians intended to use to drive in their tanks into the western part of the city. And so lots of those civilians were killed on that road in the next sort of 2 and a bit, nearly 3 weeks before the Ukrainian military, with now the then arriving Western weapons, were able to launch significant artillery attacks and broke the back of the Russian invasion there. And of course, as we saw, they then withdrew. But in those that particular day was genuinely horrendous. I have to say, it's and just listening to the audio, then you don't ever get over it. In fact, funny enough, the audio is worse than watching the pictures for me, because you can hear it. You can hear Richie shouting so much. You can hear all of us, total fear in our voices, and it was quite an exceptional moment and an actual miracle that we got out. I have to say, I think, from talking to friends in the military who were saying, the thought of 5 people escaping an ambush would be, a really poor military operation. You should not ever let 5 people get out of a single civilian non-armored car. And, you would be criticized by your senior officers if that was the case. I think we were just extremely lucky, to be honest.
Well, apologies for bringing it all back, Stuart.
No,
How
no, no, no. It's
how
fine. You sit now.
how did you recover from your wound? Where were you hit in the end?
So I was hit. I mean, lots of people say I was hit in my backside, but actually it was a bit higher than that. So the entry wound is above, like my left, above my bottom, but then came out sort of about near my kidneys.
Gosh.
My surgeon here said that I'm like the luckiest guy around, because it
Oh.
did just pass straight through me and missed everything on the way, which is remarkable. I mean, it wasn't very. I mean, funnily enough, just before I was hit, I was wondering how much it was going to hurt. And actually, what really took me out of it's not a stupor, but it is a well-known fact that when you're under extremely dangerous situation, quite often you have fight or flight, which is what most people want to do, which is to run away, or you stand and fight back, which obviously you can't do if you are not armed. But you also enter this sort of slightly catatonic phase where you do nothing. And that's not uncommon, and we were all a little bit in that phase. But I knew I was going to get hit because I could just see the car disintegrating in front of me, and I wondered whether it would hurt. And funny enough, when I felt it go in, I knew I'd been hit, but it wasn't that bad, and that really snapped me out. It's like, right, well, get yourself together, and let's get out of this car. I mean, we always knew we had to get out of the car. It's called debussing, and you knew that was it. We've practiced it many times. But there were so many rounds coming in. Trying to choose the moment where you get out is really, really hard. Sort of, you wait for a moment of quiet, but those moments seem very, very short. Dominique left, that's my producer, Dominique Van Heerden. She left just slightly before me. I mean, as she got out of the car, we were engulfed in bullets, but she's quite small and she was on the ground. That's the only reason she wasn't hit. I was then hit in the back, and Richie was then the last out. But relatively soon, shortly behind me. But he was being protected by the engine block for most of it. But he had to make that decision to go. And again, they were all over him as he was jumping down. An embankment was a sort of motorway embankment to the side that we jumped down, which was quite dangerous in itself, to be honest, because it was about at least 30 or 40 feet down, and I sort of landed on my head and almost certainly knocked myself out and had a cut on my nose. But it was better than staying in the car for certain.
I mean, just listening to you describe all this from the comfort of what is a very safe studio here is extraordinary, as I'm sure for people listening as well. But Stuart, you went back, you recovered, and then you went back to Ukraine. How was that experience for you?
It was very interesting. Yeah, we've been back a couple of times since. Sky has had staff on the ground every single day of the war, and many of them are my friends, and they're in grave danger all the time because the war has slightly changed. So it's big weapons that are being used, so missiles. So less of this sort of ambush type scenario, but more of catastrophic likely outcomes if you get blown up by or a missile lands near you. So it's extremely dangerous for all the reports, and obviously not just from Sky, but from every television and newspaper outlet. For us, we went back initially. Like these days, we always acknowledge something that when I was a younger journalist we didn't do, which is that you need help, psychological help. And my shrink, as we call her, had suggested actually going back was a good idea. Which I thought would be unlikely, but the company I think wasn't totally convinced. But we went back and did an investigation into what happened on the M06, and then we went out to the east and we did the rotation that all the journalists are doing, which is going to places like Bakhmut, which is still being hammered every single day, and it was being hammered when I was there in the summer, and you sort of follow the same path that all of us have to do. And it's really difficult actually because you can get fatigue. One of my colleagues said to me that he's interviewed the same woman as me. We've both done her about 3 times, because there's nobody left in a lot of these towns. The point is, you have to keep doing it because I think, the public needs to see what is happening there. So journalists have to go back time and again.
And Stuart, just before we go, in your view, as we mentioned in the introduction, you were there 3 months before the invasion started, 2 months before the invasion started, I beg your pardon. Having followed it all so incredibly closely, some might argue too close, how do you see this playing out in Ukraine? What's the morale on the ground, and what's the exit?
It is difficult, isn't it? Yes. I mean, I was there from 13, 14 when it all started. I've been going in and out of Ukraine for many, many years, and we just decided to sort of base ourselves there in that sort of end of December, January, February period. The arrival, obviously, of the Western weapons has been a game changer. And obviously the Ukrainians now have really got themselves together. The country is united. They definitely want to clear the Russians out of Crimea and the whole of the Donbass region. I think that's going to be really, really difficult. The only hope is to try and find some type of peace solution. But the Ukrainians are making it clear that a peace solution doesn't involve Russia just keeping hold of all of their land. And I think that's going to be the hardest bit. So this could go on for a long time yet.